Before we begin, I'd like to say that this video will be split into two parts. Part 1 will be talking about the game exclusively, whereas Part 2 will be a spoiler video discussing the story. And whilst there won't be any spoilers in the first part, I'll be using the odd piece of boss footage here or there, so if that counts as a spoiler for you, then you have been warned. It has been 5 years since the announcement that Final Fantasy VII would be getting a remake. 5 long years since everyone collectively lost their minds that one of the most iconic JRPGs of the 90s will be back on our screens in 4K and wearing some sweet new sunglasses. I remember it well. I had to get off my seat and pace around my old bedroom like a caged lion. Imagine my surprise when I would be one of the few golden ticket winners to play this remake early, courtesy of Square Enix. Though due to the fact this video is being made during the apocalypse, it seems like many others got to experience it around the same time. My camera person can't even get to me right now. I've got to do it myself. These are hard times indeed. So after playing the game extensively and beating it, what did I think? Well, let's use this handy MS Paint graph. Okay, going up and up. Ooh, dipped a little bit there. That's okay. Going back up and up. Another dip there. Not a problem. Up, up, and...
The reunion at hand may bring joy. It may bring fear. But let us embrace whatever it brings.
I'm both frightened and aroused.
So before I dive into my critique, I'll let you know my overall thoughts now. I'd say I thoroughly enjoyed 80% of what the game had to offer me. I may even go as far to say that I loved it, but that 20% still weighs on my mind, so I'll try my best to articulate my feelings as fairly as I can. There's gonna be a meaty conversation here, people, rest assured. I'd say that people can get their money's worth with Part 1. There's so much effort in this game, and it shines brighter than my eyes during Tifa's introductory trailer, the fucking queen. But as I said, there's a lot of stuff to talk about, and a good number of fixes that will hopefully make their way into Part 2. So, without further ado, let's get started. The game starts off a little differently than what we're used to. We're given a grand overview of the upper plates of Midgard before shifting into the slums. There's a brief glimpse of something familiar as we see Aerith staring at a Mako leak, before something unseen in an alley causes her to quickly leave. And just like that, we're at the bombing mission, where we're given a nice tutorial demonstrating the gameplay, and that's actually where I'm gonna start. Final Fantasy VII Remake is an action RPG. No longer do we have the old ATB turn-based system of yore. Oh no, instead we're aiming for something that suits contemporary tastes. Now, those of you who followed me for a while will know that this is something which forced me to look down the bottom of a bottle more than once. As an avid fan of turn-based tactical gameplay, the idea that turn-based isn't contemporary feels like salt in an open wound. Ah yes, Persona 5. For the boomers. Joking aside, I've come to terms with it. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but I'm 100% okay with them switching things up. Especially since the massive gameplay difference makes the two feel like completely different games. One isn't simply replacing the other. Yes, this may count as extreme foreshadowing, please look forward to Part 2. This begs the question though, was the sacrifice worth it? Well, considering how I'm booting up the game simply to enjoy the battle system, I'd say they succeeded. In 7R, you have control of 4 characters: Cloud, Barret, Tifa, and Aerith. Sorry Aerith crowd, you've lost the war on this one. Press AirF in the chat for our fallen florist.
Shut up.
You can switch between them at will so long as you're in battle, and they all have 4 quick slots which are tied to L1, plus triangle, circle, square, or cross, that allow you to use techniques on the fly, and a mode which will drastically slow down time with the cross button where a drop-down menu will appear, allowing for a smoother selection process of specific skills that may not be allocated to the L1 menu. Pretty simple, spaghetti and tomato sauce, mwah. Beautiful. However, they brought along a little companion from the original, that being the ATB system. It will slowly crawl up until it hits 1 or 2 bars. The speed of the charge is increased when you strike enemies with basic attacks. These bars are then depleted when you use magic or an ability. You unlock the latter by equipping different weapons with a specific ability allocated to each one. Use the move for long enough and bada boom, it's yours. You can also power up your weapon with these little Malwam rocks so you can hit things harder. Now overall, this system worked pretty well for me. I liked the implementation of the ATB system, and the menu you can use to select specific spells or abilities served as a nice breather as Cloud stares down a bunch of incoming missiles, wondering whether the shit dribbling down his leg will kick up a mighty twink stink. General attacks feel pretty damn great. It feels good to just wail on an enemy unless they put up a shield, in which case to the Shadow Realm with you, but each character has a specific special move which is locked to the triangle button. For Cloud, he can shift from a quick moving mode with decent DPS output to a slower moving, harder hitting DPS form, which can counter enemy attacks so long as they're hitting you physically. Barret, predictably, has a big shot which recharges slowly unless you take the time to charge it up manually. Tifa was my personal favourite. Using the Unbridled Strength ability, she can power up her whirling uppercut technique into Omni Strike, and using it 2 times in a row can turn it into Rise and Fall, making Tifa one of the characters I used the most, chaining all of her abilities together to turn her into an absolute powerhouse unless, God forbid, the enemies take off into the air. We'll get to that. Aerith was interesting. She focuses on long-range attacks exclusively, unlike Barret, who was shockingly given a melee mode with certain weapons, which definitely snatched the wig off my head to say the least. Could never really get into Tempest if I'm honest. Just threw Materia at her like this silly rascal, and that turned out just fine considering she can put down a ward that allows her to fucking multicast. Proud of you, homie. Limit breaks are fairly easy to explain. Big dick techniques that'll give you an edge in battle and make you look great as you do it. And staggering is something new they've thrown into the formula, which you'll be wanting to take advantage of as much as possible if causing grievous bodily harm sets off your serotonin modules. Putting the pressure on your enemies with various painful methods will force their stagger meter to rise. When this bar hits the top, they will stagger, increasing the DPS stonk market by a hefty amount. And you'll end up loving seeing this during certain boss encounters, especially if your damaging materia has been leveled up fully. Oof, I do love carnage. Oh yeah, Materia. Haven't forgotten about you. Now, Materia has always been one of my favourite parts of the original 7's gameplay. The customization you could go into, from game-breaking stat changes to linking various materia together to create a cornucopia of destruction, was, as my grandma would always say, pretty bodacious. In the remake, I can't really fault what they've done. They've done a great job at remaking the materia system in order to make it work in an action RPG setting. If you're used to the old materia system, you won't be confused. Materia still levels up, fire goes all the way to Faraga, etc. Putting certain materia in linked materia slots will cause nostalgic effects to occur. Magnify is this game's version of 7's all materia, so a cure spell will bounce around all of your party members. Elemental can still let you punch the shit out of your enemies with the fist of Zeus himself, and they've even thrown some new toys into the mix, such as the ability to parry and turn characters into tanks. Overall, I'd say the gameplay was very good. I was nervous about how they'd be able to remake certain gameplay elements from the original, but it turns out the answer is pretty damn well. But there's one element of the gameplay which I hope gets revised whenever Part 2 is released, and that's when the game forces you to fight aerial enemies with melee characters. Sure, you can jump like a flea and smack whatever is there automatically, but you can't really move when you're up there. Enemies, however, can. So you need to land, get underneath the enemy and launch back up there to fill up your ATB faster, or you risk running around waiting for it to load so you can hit them with your magic. I came up with something that I'd like to see in Part 2 if they want to make gameplay feel even more satisfying than it already is. Of course, I'd like all of these to be in the game as default, but I'm going to roll with what they've been doing already, keeping mechanics tucked nicely away in your equipment. Imagine, if you will, an acrobatics material. At level 1, you'll get access to aerial recovery. This is something which is missing from the game, and during certain bosses or enemies, you'd certainly wish you had it. At level 2, you'd get an aerial dodge for melee characters, or a quick ground dash to replace your dodge for your ranged characters. This way, melee characters can have some form of control in the air, but it also gives your ranged characters a fun new toy to play around with. Level 3 could be an increased run speed in combat, and level 4 could be extending your dodges even further. Obviously, a lot of these hypothetical inclusions mean they would need to balance enemies, which would make this materia useful for a lot of fights instead of chance occasions. But I'd love to have some more options to play around with. I like to have options, what can I say? Also, not sure if this makes me blind, an idiot, both, or I missed part of a tutorial because healing outside of battle was ridiculous for a while, needing to pop in and out of the menu until I noticed a bite-sized prompt for ants just above the drop-down menu.
Oh, hello.
Dungeons were good for the most part. Overall, they served their purpose well, but I was much more of a fan of dungeons which felt like I was always moving forward at a decent speed, with fun battles thrown in to change up the pace. I'd say a good portion were like this, but a few had some sections that dragged on for far too long. Turn off a light? Nah, make it 3. A fun way to turn the claw from the original 7 into something which can interact with the environment? Well, you've got to do it again and again. Don't worry, Sephiroth, I'll do the job for you.
We're gonna shake, shake,
And this pattern continues throughout a lot of these dungeons. At least the Airbuster segment actually had an impact on the boss's techniques, which was really cool. But in order to do that, you've got to go to a room, beat the enemies, pick up a key card, select the option, and repeat the exact same pattern 2 more times. The best thing I can take from the extended dungeon length are the character interactions. Say what you want, but I personally loved the banter between all of the characters. Some of my favourite pieces of dialogue were just inane conversations the characters were having, like Barrett talking about the bedtime stories he'd read to Marlene.
Loves it when I read it to her before bedtime, doing all the voices.
Or literally anything between Aerith and Cloud.
Shit.
I hope part 2 expands on the fun dynamic between your party. It was extremely wholesome. I feel the development team were put between a rock and a hard place with the dungeon length though. If they cut a lot of the padding, then people would complain that the game isn't long enough. And if you include padding, then you'll get people complaining that they're blatantly extending game time. As to where I land, I'd be fine if the game was a little bit shorter if it meant the dungeons flowed more smoothly. Hopefully in part 2, they won't need to extend dungeons like this, considering we aren't simply stuck in Midgar. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But no matter what, I'm already very excited to see how they'll tackle things. Let's move on to something much more positive, and it's something where I'll be using Final Fantasy XV as an example. The summon spells. The reason why I chose Final Fantasy XV as an example is because it's the closest thing I can use. See, in 15, when you're at critically low health, a summon spell will be triggered. This served as a last effort to turn your enemy into a delicious medium rare steak. However, they were out of your control. In Final Fantasy VII Remake, it works in a similar kind of way, where you're either brought to low health or you've reached a certain point in battle, triggering the summon spell. However, the amount of control they give you compared to 15 is, oh boy, real fucking tasty stuff.
How do you like this?
Yeah, it's delicious.
Instead of having them work like an automated cutscene with utter carnage being a result, they are instead temporary party members. You can't control them, but you can give them direction. Using either 1 or 2 slots of your ATB charge, you can tell your mythical boyfriends or girlfriends to slap the ass of your enemies pretty damn hard. Whilst this does come with risk, that being the very fact that your precious ATB is being used to help fuel them, the reward is too sweet to resist. That being a lot of damage. Finally, when the summons gauge has run out, it'll devastate the enemy with their final technique, giving us a flashy cutscene and a whole lot of numbers that would give my tax advisor quite the half charm, but let me tell you. The best thing about summons in this game is how you obtain them. With the help of Shinra's very own manufactured Melvin, Chadley, you'll be given a healthy dose of side missions to complete whilst battling your enemies. Make them stagger a certain amount of times, use the assess materia in combat, etc, so on. The more of these side missions you complete, you'll eventually be given a special VR mission, where you select your party and get to face the summon spell in a completely optional fight. I don't know if I've expressed it in other videos, but optional boss fights in games make me very happy. So this was like a giant gift made just for little old me. Right, I've covered gameplay. What's next?
Whoa, nice graphics!
I don't need to stay on this section for too long. The game, at least most of it, is absolutely breathtaking. A tour de force by the development team. The painstaking amount of detail into how a majority of this game looks made my brain expand. I noticed this when I stopped to get a better look of Cloud's face for completely normal scientific purposes and saw that his eyes were fucking moving around like a real boy. Like an actual in real life boy. I still remember being a kid watching Advent Children and dreaming of a day where I could actually play a game where Cloud looks like that. And now I'm playing something that looks even better. It's unreal, engine. That being said, the further I progressed, the more hiccups I would encounter. NPC models are fine, but there are a few who look much lower quality when you put them side by side with Cloud and the rest of the gang. It can be quite distracting. Sometimes it legitimately felt like these 4K models just crashed a high school catwalk and told all of these ugly bitches to watch and learn. Graphical pop-ins were quite noticeable throughout the game, which is fine in a game this large, but then there are some textures which the game lingers on for quite a while, and the entire time I was watching it like, come on, pop in. Oh, that's just how you look. Just a little issue there, but damn, it just itched, you know? Now, the next one is definitely more of a taste thing, but it's about the gorgeous new OST that plays throughout 7 Remake. I'll put myself out there and say there's barely a single weak link as far as the soundtrack goes. Listening to some tunes out of context made my back erupt with goosebumps, my favourite track in the game being the phenomenal mix of a battle theme and the Shinra theme for Rufus's boss fight. I actually paused the game for a solid minute just soaking it all in. Shit was a banger. Now, even though I stand by what I said, said that there isn't a weak link in the OST, I do think some of the tracks placed here or there don't have the same intended vibe of the original game. I remember playing the demo and entering the Mako reactor, and this theme started to play. My reason for bringing this up was how long it took me to realise what iconic piece of music they were remaking. The PS1 Mako reactor theme just oozes with dread. The bells and vocals making it feel like looming, oppressing eyes are watching every single step you take. And the synth complements the strange techno fantasy that 7 paints as a whole. Nobuo Uematsu really nailed the dystopian sci-fi feeling of Midgar with his music. And I know 2 other composers were involved in 7 Remake alongside him, so whether or not Uematsu wanted these changes himself, I really can't answer. I just miss some of the original sounds is all, especially Wall Market, which despite being my favourite zone in the remake has had the original theme, Oppressed People, replaced with The Town That Never Sleeps, which despite sounding fine by itself, definitely doesn't make me feel as dirty as the former. In the original, I wanted to take a shower and leave this place as soon as I could. In the remake, I wanted to party till gin started oozing from my pores. But as I said, it's a taste thing end of the day. You win some, you lose some. As a whole though, negatives and all, I really can't deny that I loved playing Final Fantasy VII Remake. As I said, after I finished the game, I went back to the optional fights and just kept playing. I hope that in part 2 they managed to implement a bunch of quality of life changes and just smoothen out a lot of the other elements. Gameplay, whilst fun, still runs into problems here or there, and graphically, while stunning for the most part, I feel like certain elements are going to age very poorly compared to the show-stopping main cast. Oh, you know what? On that topic, I forgot to mention, 7 Remake has some of the best damn looking cats I've ever seen in gaming. That's it, that's all I have to say there. Fucking pss pss pss. As for things I'm excited for in the future, it'll be nice to move out from Midgar. I've personally never been a massive fan of industrial heavy zones, and it's no fault of the game if I'm honest. It just lands, yet again, as a taste thing. Seriously, look at this little guy go. What a legend. I think it's a testament to the world building that I felt invested enough to push past my own aesthetic biases and actually enjoyed a lot of what was shown to me. However, in part 2, knowing that there will be rolling fields, farm towns, swamps, cave systems, forests, these are all really high on my locations I love in gaming list. So I can't wait to see how these will all look when part 2 comes out. Hopefully on the PS5. I think now is a perfect time to ask, but what stuff are all of you guys excited to see in part 2? I'd love to see some of your input, so let me know in the comments. As to whether I'd recommend the game, I'd say yes, with an asterisk. If you want to play one of Square Enix's biggest technical achievements, filled with content, filled with care, love and craft, then I'd say go for it. However, older fans of a game need to be aware that things will be different in many ways. This is not the remake everyone thought it would be, and I really do think it's important to let the uninitiated know that before going in. It's divisive for a reason, and I believe people are completely within their right to feel any way they want to about it, black, white or grey. And new players might want to play the original Midgar section before diving in. It's approximately 6 hours long, so it's not a slog to get through, and it'll give you a basic understanding of what the remake is adding or flat out remaking. This isn't necessary. I know a bunch of new players who've started out with this and loved it regardless. But even if you've played the remake first, playing the original 7 after the fact will grant you a lot of unanswered questions if you've somehow avoided OG 7 spoilers all your life, or haven't learnt about the game via osmosis. Heavily recommended. The original has survived the test of time for a damn good reason. Now we're going to be moving on to the story section of Final Fantasy VII Remake, and this is where I'll ask you to all wait patiently for part 2 of the video. I think it's safe to say that there's a lot to talk about, and more than anything, I just want to have fun with it. So please, sit back, take it easy, and I hope to have the next video out for you real soon. Bye-bye. Well, we still have one more video to go. I'm going to be replaying the game a second time on Twitch to take more notes, so please look forward to the spoiler critique when it drops. And, you know, follow me on Twitch if you want to watch that. It's pretty good stuff. Before I move on, I'd like to thank some patrons. Those being Anthony Ha, Blue X Crystal, Mary Schwartz, and Samuel Kojo. Thank you very much for your continued support. It really does mean a lot. If you'd like to help appease the algorithm gods, then leave a like and subscribe, or Or if you'd like to help out in a different way, then I do have the aforementioned Patreon, which can be found in the description below. Pledging on the lowest tier can allow you to scroll by on the right-hand side of the credits, and there are other tiers to access as well. Anything is appreciated, so thank you if you can. On that note, it's time for me to return to my coffin and pray that Vincent Valentine joins me. I really wish he'd stop leaving me on red. Catch you all in the next video, and thank you so much for watching.